In the tapestry of life, where every thread holds a story, America in black and white emerges as a haven for the voices echoing through the heart of our communities. In this podcast, we wade through the rivers of our collective experiences, celebrating the vibrant hues of change brought forth by the whispers of hope and the roars of action. It's more than just a conversation. It's a journey into the heart of our society, illuminated by the light of those daring to dream and do. Join us, and let your voice be the melody that guides us toward a dawn where every color finds its place in the masterpiece of our shared destiny. Together, let's paint a future brimming with the positives that dwell in our minds and the actions that shape our world.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to another episode of America in Black and White, where we are coloring conversations on the canvas of America. Tonight, our special guest is Mr. Milton Corsey. Milton Corsey is a transformative leadership strategist and director of human capital solutions at Achieve Next. With over a decade of experience, Milton empowers new and emerging leaders to evolve from individual contributors into high-performance team architects. His work centers on cultivating cultures of excellence, resilience, and accountability, helping organizations unlock their full potential through intentional leadership development. Milton's approach blends strategic insight with human-centered coaching, guiding clients to elevate their leadership skills and build empowered, results-driven teams. He holds a bachelor's degree from the Villanova School of Business and an MBA from the Hall School of Business at St. Joseph's University. Deeply inspired by the legacy of Reginald Lewis and the revolutionary clarity of Malcolm X, Milton brings a powerful blend of business acumen and cultural consciousness to every conversation. His appearance tonight on America in Black and White is a masterclass in leadership, legacy, and the power of Black excellence. Ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Milton Corsey.
Charles, it's really a pleasure to be on your podcast, and I almost didn't recognize that guy you were talking about there. He sounds pretty impressive, but I'm really looking forward to our conversation, my friend.
Hey, well, thank you for being here. Is there anything you'd like to add to your bio before we get into the show?
To my bio, no, not particularly. The only thing I would like to make sure that the audience is aware of is the idea of leadership is not something that is only for the few, right? Anybody and everybody can be a leader. Leadership is an action word, it's a verb, right? And it's about influence. And that's kind of what I try to teach the folks that I work with, and hopefully what people will get from our conversation today.
Oh, wow. See, I like that. And as you speak, we're gonna start off with your leadership development. And what I like for people to get from what we talk about here in your leadership is your philosophy and methods for cultivating leaders. So first, can you tell us what inspired your journey into leadership development?
Well, great question. Thank you so much for asking. There were really quite a few things that were big drivers of it, and I think that part of it was like my mother was very politically active, and she was in the time of great social change in America, right? And I got to see where men and women from seemingly humble beginnings were able to impact the most powerful nation in the world, right? And so I realized that, what's the old admonition? I'm sure you've heard this one before. If it is to be, it's up to me, right? It's up to us as individuals. And so part of what I focus in on as my life's work at this point is how can I help individuals? How can I help Charles King? How can I help Milton Corsey? How can I help the listeners and the watchers of this program today become the most powerful and potent version of themselves? And there's some basic fundamental building blocks that I've learned over the years that I'd like to share with the people I work with.
Oh, wow. And so how do you define the high performance leadership in today's workplace?
High performance leadership is simply put, is when the sum, when the sum is greater than the total of the parts, right? And we've seen it. I don't know if you're a sports fan or whatever, but we've always seen teams that they have a couple of really, really good players, but they're able to perform at a level that seems to defy the talent in the room. Probably for me, one of the most recent examples of that was the Tom Brady led, what was it, New England Patriots, right? You had Tom, you had a couple other stars, but there were a bunch of guys. How did that team consistently outperform everybody else in the NFL? That's a high performance paradigm in the model. There's a methodology to that. It's not luck, right? They had a process that they go through to kind of build that team, create relationships in such a way that people had high trust in each other so that they felt free to perform at their peak level in those most intense moments.
So when you think about, techniques and strategies itself in general, when it comes to how you're teaching this leadership development, what are some of the approaches that you use in order to bring this into fruition? Or is it based on the group of people, the characters, the people separately? What do you do to make this come to life?
Great. Thanks again for the question. It's really, we focus in on how do you build and sustain relationships. One of the first things I share with any new leader who I speak with is you're in the people business. And people, by definition, and if you want to get into the neuroscience, I'd be more than happy to have that conversation. But people are feeling beings that think, not thinking beings that feel. It is important that we make that connection at an emotional level and that we build relationships with people. And, and I'm sure over the time when we're talking today, we can go through some of the specifics of how you go about doing that specifically in a work environment, but it's about relationships and we can never forget that.
Wow. So then in this case, and let's break that down just a little bit more. So let's say with this dynamic from this neural perspective in which you're talking about, would this be based on the emotional intelligence of the people, or is it based on their can-do skills that they have already?
I'm more concerned with the emotional intelligence, right? I can teach you skill. We can learn those things. I can, or you as a leader of that team, I can help you learn how to put people in positions where they can be successful. But it is most important that you understand human beings, how to connect. Because in leadership management theory, there's this thing called discretionary effort. And simply stated, discretionary effort is what you give me that you don't have to give me. Right? When you're on the team or you have a job description, as long as you are doing the things that are in that job description, you're fulfilling your job, right? That's what's going to make us great. What's going to make us great is that discretionary effort, the things that you don't have to do, but that you're willing to do because you feel valued as a member of the team. That's an emotional intelligence paradigm. It has nothing to do with skill.
Oh, wow. So what's the biggest challenge new leaders face when stepping into management roles?
Probably one of the biggest challenges that they face, because most people get promoted into managerial or leadership roles because of their expertise, right? For instance, if it's a sales team that I'm leading, I get promoted to be the sales manager because I'm the best salesperson. Or if I'm leading, if I'm at a law firm and I'm leading, and I'm managing partner, I typically got that role because I'm a superior attorney, or maybe even a superior rainmaker. I bring in the most clients. But ultimately, like I said, leadership is about influence. It's not about skill. It's about being able to identify the target, whatever that goal might be, right? Say a 20% growth in revenue. And then here's how we're going to go about that. And to be able to persuade, convince, and empower people to bring that into fruition. That's really what leadership is. And so it's very different. Most people get promoted because they're good at a task, not because they're good at leading people.
So that was going to be, that's my next follow-up.
Okay.
Is that Okay, let's just say, they may bring in these numbers, but these numbers can't quantify leading others. So, is there like a backlash to that promotion, or do you think that promotion is just always merited because that's the system?
Sure, great question. So here's what I would say. Generally speaking, generally speaking, oftentimes the most elite individual contributors are not the greatest leaders. They don't make good leaders, right? And so if and when I have the opportunity to work with senior leadership before they start thinking about promotion, we'll talk about that. Right. So there might be a way to reward the person who is an outstanding individual contributor, but they're not necessarily a people leader. And we need to look for, like you said, things like emotional intelligence, empathy, caring, all these words that sound kind of soft and mushy. Those are things that you really want your leaders to have. And sometimes, so oftentimes, the best leader isn't necessarily your greatest sales guy or salesperson. Let me use person instead of guy. I don't want to be there to be seconds, but it might not be the best salesperson. It might be the person who's the best at helping people grow and reach their potential. And again, if we want to make a sports analogy, think about the Magic Johnsons, the Larry Birds, the Michael Jordans. They were good coaches. They were good leaders. Right? They're phenomenal athletes, phenomenal individual contributors. But who are the best coaches? The Phil Jacksons, the Bill Belichick's, although he's having a heck of a time down there in North Carolina right now. But a lot of these guys who were just marginal players, right? It's a really, really different skill set. So it's important. So that's a great question. I admonish anybody who's thinking about promoting people to really consider their EQ, their emotional intelligence, before you promote them into a role where they're going to lead people. Because again, human beings are feeling beings that think, not thinking beings that feel.
But and so just to just one more follow up to that is, like, again, since we're talking about leadership development, and and I guess that is basically the emphasis that most business structures want to use as their basis for having the best people, and so we understand that part.
Right.
But so when we just get down to it, I mean, is there really uh, uh, a justification for what is considered to be just an actual natural system of what we consider to be a successful model that does just the same principles that we're talking about, for how people promote people, instead of actually doing the real work and picking out that actual person that's got the real leadership skills? Because it's just my understanding, so you can help me out with this,
Okay.
that people that's got the real leadership skills are the ones that primarily, a lot of times, are those that people order around because they're the real worker bees, let's call it that. But they're able to take everybody that's working in these areas with them and have them perform and get to this new level. Why is it that that person can't be considered the person that should be leading?
That's a great question. I think oftentimes the folks who you just described don't necessarily have aren't, and I'm trying to think of the best word I can use to describe it is, and this one isn't perfect, they don't exhibit those narcissistic tendencies.
I'm
Right?
sorry.
No, it's fair, because I was just trying to use a better word than the narcissist, and I really couldn't come up with what in the moment. But those self-promotion there are certain elements of narcissism there, right? Look at me, look at me, look at me.
Yeah.
Right? And while I don't have a problem with a healthy self-esteem. There's a tipping point, right, where that trips over into narcissism, and that's counterproductive.
Yes.
And oftentimes the people that you just described are the person who's unassuming, is all about team, not about themselves, doesn't self-promote, doesn't do those things, but they're really excellent at coalescing people around a goal. Right?
Right.
Those are the people that we should be promoting. Those are the people that we should be extolling. That's the virtue that I think we should be looking for, and not the person who is double jointed and can pat themselves on the back and say how wonderful I am and look at all the cool stuff I've done. I think sometimes and I think frankly, because we tend to promote the people who will get in the front of the line and wave their hands and say, look at me, look at me, and look at me. But oftentimes, if I look in the organizations that I work with, we look at, and I don't want to make this a political conversation, but even if we look at our government, right? The people who end up being in charge aren't the best leaders. And there's a consequence for that, right? Yeah. There is lower performance in the in the corporate world and also in our government. And it's fundamentally because we don't make wise choices about who we put in charge.
So I think that makes a person like yourself, it makes your job that much more difficult, in developing these people because of that very reason that you just explained.
Oh, 100%. This is the not joke that I often mention. Typically, I'll get brought in by senior leadership, and this is typically a microcosm of how that conversation goes. Right? They'll bring me in and they say, hey, listen, I need help with my team. They're not performing the way that I need them to perform. They're not getting the job done. And typically I'll sit there and I'll listen to them and I'll take notes. I'll ask a bunch of diagnostic questions and they'll answer all my questions. And I'll go through and we'll do like a 360 with every member of the team and I'll get a sense of it. And almost invariably, the problem's them.
Yes.
Now I can't just, and I know that when I sit down, but I don't tell them that. I go through the process so they can get it, so that they can get an objective viewpoint of themselves. The one advantage that I have is that as a consultant, as a contractor, right, it's easier for me to speak truth to power because, full stop, I've already got your money. You can't hire me. So I'm going to tell you the truth. You know what I mean? So I'm not there every day because it's very difficult for the people who report to you to tell you that you're the issue.
Right.
I can, because again, I'm the outsider, I'm the consultant, and they don't have the kind of power over me that they have over their day-to-day stuff. Just think about it. That person, man, woman, does not matter, has power to decide whether or not you're going to be able to support your family, that you're going to be able to pay your mortgage. Are you going to tell him or her you're toxic? You don't know what you're doing?
Right.
No. Now, oftentimes we talk about that behind their back. We've all been in those rooms, right? We'll talk about it. That dude's a freaking idiot. But don't tell them to their face. And that's, so you're absolutely right that people typically are not that self-aware, but that's the advantage I have. Like when I go in, I will be, and I'll tell you that up front. Like if you were to hire me in an engagement, I'd say, Charles, will do our due diligence, but I'm going to be candid with you. I think that I owe you that. If you're going to, I owe you that. And sometimes the problem may be you. And quite frankly, oftentimes it is. Yeah.
So how do you help leaders shift from doing to leading?
Well, it's about creating this kind of empowerment paradigm. Well, let me take a step back. There's two things I do, right? The first thing is that we'll go through and we'll discuss what I call the 3 C's model. Okay. And when you're looking at because in the 3 C's model is really a framework for building trust, right? Because trust, especially in the workplace, is composed of these 3 things. It's competence, the ability to do the task, whatever it is I'm asking you to do. It is consistency. I know you're going to do what you say you're going to do when you say you're going to do it. And the third is, and this is the third C is caring, right? I think Maya Angelou said it best, right? He said, no one cares what people will forget what you said. People will forget what you do, but they'll never forget how you make them feel.
Yep.
Right? So it is important with those three things, as a leader, typically those are the first things I ask people to assess each member of your team. Okay. If there's a challenge that you're having with them, which one of those is it? Is it that you don't think the person is competent? Okay, great. Well, I have something called an empowerment matrix that we can use it to help this person build skill so that we can address that. If it's a consistency issue, oftentimes consistency is really a function of culture, right? Because like an example I love to give is Charles is Charles. Let me ask you a question, Charles. What is your favorite sports team?
The Pittsburgh Steelers.
Pittsburgh Steelers. I'm an Eagles guy. Go Birds. So we will never get along with that, but that's fair enough. Fair enough. But okay. When's the last time you went to a game?
Oh wow. It's been a couple of years.
Okay, no worries. I just want to get you in the mental framework of thinking about that experience, right? When you're at Three Rivers Stadium, I think it's still Three Rivers, right?
It's Acrisure Stadium now.
Acrisure, okay, you're right. When you're at Acrisure Stadium, I just aged myself when I said Three Rivers.
I was at the last game when we played the Houston Oilers.
Okay, but when you're at Acrisure Stadium, right? You think about what that's like and how you comport yourself. I'm guessing that you're probably, when the Steelers do something good, you're cheering. When they don't do something well, you're booing. Or when the other team has the ball, you're making as much noise as possible to make it uncomfortable for them in that environment. You're doing all those things, right? Because that's the cultural norm. That's the context. You're supposed to act that way. Right. You're in compliance. Conversely, if you're at the library or studying in a classroom or you're at a lecture or whatever, right? You're the exact same human being. Or your behavior is the same. Why not?
Well, see, that's because that means the environment has changed. So if the environment has changed and what's expected for that norm, that's where you fit into that norm.
Boom. And that's what leaders do when it comes to creating that consistency. What does it mean to work for company X? What are the expectations? How do we create an environment that reinforces and engenders the behaviors that we're looking for? Right? Those are important things for leaders to focus in on. And then finally, it's the caring piece. Right? Get to know people in your team. Ask them questions about, and most people's environments have tells. Right. Like for instance, if I'd have been a bit more astute, I would have noticed in your background you have that football above you, and I see the Steelers emblem and all that kind of good stuff now. So, but all of those things, that's an easy way for me to start a conversation with you. That's an easy way for me to connect with you. I'd say, hey, what do you think? Steelers looking pretty good this year. Aaron Rodgers got him playing pretty good. He's those are ways I can connect with you as a human being. And when I connect with you that way, right, and you start to think that Charles and Milton have a connection, and if you're on my team, right, and I'm fully engaging you all the time, and I see you as a human being, and one of the conversations I typically have with folks, or that I suggest that leaders have with their team members, is ask them, like, Charles, what do you want to be doing 2 or 3 years from now? What are your aspirations? Right? Because my goal as the leader of this team is obviously that to help us reach our goals. But I want to do that in such a way that I'm helping you move closer to your goals as well.
Yes.
Right. And you know what I'll get from you? Then I start to get, if you recall back a few moments ago, I talked about the whole idea of a discretionary effort. You're all in because I'm all in with you. Right. So now I'm going to get that from you. So that's one of the first places we start. And I want to get them fully immersed in that idea, and that's what leadership is about. If you're leading the sales team and you have a 20% growth goal as your goal for that year, or you're running production and we want to increase efficiency by 15%, or reduce spoilage. I was just with a client earlier today who's in food manufacturing, so that's why the whole spoilage thing is in there, right? But all of those things, all of those outcomes are derivatives of process, right? You can't make that happen directly. You can control what you can control. How do you create the culture? How do you make sure that people are competent? How do you make sure that people are all in so that they're giving you, because here's the bottom line, your team members are going to see things and know things about the operation that you simply will not know as leader. Just isn't going to happen, right? But if you build the relationships, you get access to that.
So what's your approach to coaching someone through imposter syndrome?
Great question. I think imposter syndrome is something that a lot of us suffer from. I suffer from it as well. I think that when I try to coach people through things like that, it's all about awareness, right? You don't see yourself the way the world necessarily sees you, right? And oftentimes, it's so funny. I was with a client yesterday. I was having this conversation with him because he has imposter syndrome, and I said, imposter syndrome is essentially like, if you remember when, if you've ever been to a carnival or a circus or whatever, and they have like the fun house mirrors that are really kind of distort how you look. You look taller, shorter, got a really big head, little short, all those things. That's a distortion of what you actually look like, right? And what I like to remind people of is that the way that we typically, especially when you're suffering from imposter syndrome, seriously, it's a distortion. That's not who you actually are, right? And when you look, and so if you have, the vast majority of people giving you certain feedback, that feedback's probably accurate, more accurate than yours is. The other thing I share with them, because I've had this great good luck, is I've been in the boardrooms with some of the most significant business leaders in our country. I've worked with Wall Street firms, with Fortune 1000 retailers. I've worked with major transportation companies, and I've been in the room with their CEOs. And you know what I found out? They're just people. Some of them are smart, some of them not so much. Matter of fact, there's a well, I don't know if he's still the CEO. There's been a number of years, but he's the CEO of a major financial institution of Wall Street, which will remain nameless because I don't want to. Okay. I literally walked out of there wondering how that man found his way home every day. He was an idiot. Literally. I'm like, I'm guessing his wife probably sews his address in his underwear, so if he gets lost, people can send him home. And this man was the CEO of a major financial institution on Wall Street.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So I think to the degree that you can humanize the people who you maybe feel less than, you realize that they're just people. They're just people like you. Right, like there's other, and this would be the last example. Like this company I used to work with, a discount retailer, their CEO went bankrupt 4 times before he finally hit it big.
Wow. Just that lucky hit.
Well, it's no, I wouldn't call it luck. Okay, I would call it perseverance, because here's the thing about failure. I think some people miss. Failure is not a destination. Failure is part of your journey. There is no one who I know who has ever been wildly successful, the most successful people that you ever heard of. Bet you if you ask them their story, you'll find plenty of times where they failed. Like everybody knows famously of the Michael Jordan story when he was a sophomore in high school and got cut from his high school basketball team, right? Failure. If he had let that stop him, you wouldn't know who Michael Jordan is. This gentleman I just told you about went bankrupt 4 times before he hit it big. If he had let any of those stop him, you would never know who he is. And you would know who this company is, right? They're major retailer, billions of dollars a year. So It's about your relationship with the idea of failure, right? And understanding failure is an inextricable part of success. If you can rebuild that, and if you can just acknowledge your fears or or your imposter syndrome and say, okay, I feel that. That
Mm.
doesn't make it real. You know, your feelings, another one of my favorite sayings, your feelings aren't facts. They're your feelings. They're real.
Right.
It's not a fact. It's important, I think, that when we have those moments, which I think we all have, is that you are aware that this is what's
Mhm.
happening, okay, and you're able to set that aside and continue to move forward.
Well, now these people with imposter syndrome, what is
Mhm.
from your experience, what has been the normal effects of the work environment, that work culture that's centered in that group of people? What has that been like?
Okay, there's a couple of ways to look at that, right? I think that and one of the things, like I said, I think imposter syndrome is something that a lot of people have. It happens a lot, and we as leaders can decide to create an environment that softens the blow of that, or we can create an environment that reinforces those
Mm.
negative things, right? Um, and I think if you want your team, your organization to grow, people need to grow and they need to be able to overcome their fears. How do you do that? One of the ways that you do that is by creating an environment where failure is not only accepted, but celebrated. Sounds a little
Oh wow.
counterintuitive. Sounds
Okay.
counterintuitive, but it isn't. Right? The only fail because failure requires
Hmm.
effort. You've tried something, you've done something
Right.
to fail, right? That's a positive. The idea that you
Okay.
tried is a positive. So, but now, as the leader of the team or leader of the organization, what I need to do is make sure that your failures aren't
Hmm.
fatal. So, we create a framework, a paradigm where you can fail forward. You can make a
Hmm.
mistake. You can learn from that mistake, but that mistake isn't devastating. That mistake that doesn't destroy you. And as leaders, it's important. I can put you in that position, right? You can make a small mistake. It's not going to kill you. You move forward. It's kind of like one of the examples I give oftentimes is that if we think about when our children were very very tiny. I don't know if you have children, but if you remember when you put them in a
Hmm.
playpen, right? You remember playpen? You put them in a playpen for what
So
exact
they
reason?
so they don't get hurt, or that you can always keep an eye on them. You keeping them in a spot.
Exactly. They get to explore their environment in a safe way. That's what that
Mm-hmm.
is, right? And you know that exploration of the environment is central to your child's growth. They need to explore so they can learn and grow. But you need them to learn and grow in a safe environment. Thus the playpen. And then eventually from the playpen, what do? Well, we have a playroom for them or a safe place where they can go and play, and that gets bigger and bigger and bigger until they've learned how to operate in this great environment. Well, you do the same thing with the people who report to you, you know, metaphorically. How can I put people in a position where they can be successful, slow, and grow? And if they make a mistake, you make a mistake. You learn from it.
Hmm.
You grow. I'll give you an example of a company. I don't know if you remember them. I haven't heard much of them lately. There was an online shoe company called
Yes.
Zappos. Okay, you remember Zappos? Zappos used to every week get their team together and celebrate the biggest mistake.
Okay.
And yeah, and yeah, and they would actually give that person $1,000 gift certificate.
Oh wow.
Yeah, right. Because again, that failure was about moving forward. We want that. We need that. Right. So oftentimes this imposter syndrome is about your relationship with the concept of failure. If you see failure as something to be avoided, right? It can create
Okay.
paralysis. If you see failure as simply part of the process to your success, you want to fail forward. And this will be the last example I give you. And this is kind of funny. Think about probably when I'm roughly the same age as Barry Bonds, right? Within the, right? Who I thought was the best baseball player I ever freaking saw in my life. Unbelievable.
Right.
That was unbelievable. You know what his lifetime batting average was?
Well, Barrett had a pretty, he was above average hitter. Yeah.
Oh, 100%.
Yeah, because he played for my team, the Pirates.
That's right, Pittsburgh. I forgot about that. I should have used somebody else. but no. But you're right. I was thinking, but here's the thing. I think if memory serves me, I believe that Barry Bonds' lifetime batting average was somewhere around 375.
It was pretty high.
Well, yeah, which is very high. You know, what does that? But think about in percentages. What does that tell me?
In percentages, what that tell you is that he's top-notch talent. That is definitely a leader.
Exactly. But think about the failure rate. 375 batting average means he failed what? 625% of the time. 62.5% of the time he went up to that plate,
yes,
he failed. He is one of the greatest baseball players who's ever lived. The relationship with failure is important, right? That guy batted 375. That means, like I said, that means 62.7% of the times he went up there, he failed at his mission. Mm-hmm. But he's great. So it's about how you see things, right? Like I told you, this guy went back there 4 times. He's now a billionaire with a B, right? Because he didn't quit. Because he learned from his mistakes. He learned from his failures. And that's what I would always try to get people to kind of understand.
Wow. So let's move over to the work you do in team empowerment. And so we want to talk about, we'll go into the form of the strategies that you do for building the strong collaborative teams. What does team empowerment look like in practice?
Team empowerment looks like in practice is that everybody independently is about their tasks, but they're doing it in an interdependent way. It may sound counterintuitive, but the idea is that Charles is doing what Charles needs to do for the team to be successful. Milton, who's on Charles's team, is doing what he needs to do to make the team successful. And they both trust that each other are doing those things so that Charles can focus on what he's doing. He doesn't have to look over his shoulder to see what Milton's doing. Milton doesn't have to look over his shoulder to see what Charles is doing. I can focus on what I'm doing. And that synergy, when all of us are doing that together, that's when the sum is greater than the total of the parts. We're going to outperform ourselves because everybody is capable, everybody is competent, and everybody trusts everybody else on that team.
Yeah. Wow. So how do you help leaders build trust within their teams?
Well, how do I help them build trust within their teams? It really goes back to those 3 C's, right? Because you will trust somebody. Think about the people who you work with on a regular basis, right? If you don't trust them, something is missing. What is it? It's usually one of those 3 C's that I talked about. It is usually 8. You don't think that Milton is competent to do the task that he needs to do. So then the question becomes, how do you as a leader help him develop that competence? Right? So how do I create a framework so that Milton grows? Right? If it is a consistency issue and Milton isn't consistent, okay, then what can I do? Or what do we need to do? What plan can we put in place to reinforce that consistency? And then third, is Milton a team player? And we've all worked with people like this, right? We work with some people who are all about the team and some people are all about themselves. And the one thing I will say about, and I'm always for helping people grow and develop and mature, but sometimes it's not possible. And when that's the case, that person, whoever that person is, who's not living up to what they're supposed to do, that person needs to be eliminated, right? And you cannot be afraid to do that. It's like, the admonition I'll give is if Charles goes to the doctor tomorrow and finds out that he has some kind of a disease, he has a tumor, the doctor's just going to say, hey, we need to get you ready for surgery, and we're going to remove that thing to get you back to health. So I want you to live a healthy lifestyle. And if you do all the things we want you to do, Charles, maybe that never happens. But when it does happen, we eliminate that thing, because we cannot allow that thing to undermine the team. Right. So I'm all for helping people grow. I'm all for helping people get better. But sometimes there are people who are net negative to the team. And as a leader, you need to be able to eliminate that person when the time comes.
So what are the signs of a high-performing team culture?
High-performing team culture is clarity around what success looks like, right? What that means is clarity around role, what I need to do to make that team successful about that thing, and clarity of mission, or what ties us together. Like, why are we doing this thing? What is it that this is about? And we have to be in alignment on those things. If we're in alignment on those things, the team will typically perform exceptionally well. Most teams that don't perform well, I find one of those things are missing, right? In other words, and it may sound crazy, but it's stunning that people don't really understand what the goal is. Like, what does success look like for us at the ABC division of Unilever? What does success look like? When I start off at the beginning of the day, how do I know when 5 o'clock comes, or whenever I'm done for the day, was I successful? That should be clear in everybody's head, right? One of the great beauties of sport is we keep score. We know, right? If it's a baseball game, we know who won at the end. Football game, we know who won. Basketball, I know who won, right? But think about work. Do you know that you won today? How do you know that?
Interesting.
Right? So I think that as leaders, it's important for us to be clear about that. Because I want people to walk in and say, today that when they walk out of the day, at the end of the day, it was a successful day. Why? Because we were able to accomplish A, B, or C. Or today wasn't a successful day. Why? Well, we had problems here. In these two areas, what can we do to fix that moving forward? Clarity is hugely important. I think a lot of times people just don't understand that.
So let me ask you this, just following up to that. How does communication play its part in that whole situation?
Wow. I can't believe we've gone this long. What's this? 40 minutes, 40 plus minutes before we talked about communication. Communication is the lifeblood of any team or organization. So you are so spot on there, right? We need to be able to communicate. We need to be and need to make sure that we understand one another when we are communicating, because there's a huge difference between talking and communicating. Like, I'm sure you've heard about active listening, right? And I'm sure you've heard it, right? But for our viewing audience, those of you who have, or maybe some of you who have not heard of what active listening is. Active listening, the way that I can best describe it is, active listening is listening to understand, not to respond. Right? So when you listen, because how many times and I'm guilty. There's been times, especially if I'm having a debate, because I love a great debate, right? So I'm having a debate with somebody. Oftentimes, I hear them, they're talking, but as they're talking, I'm formulating my response, right? And I'm like, "Oh, Charles said that. I got him now. I got him where I want him, and I'm going to pounce." We communicate in such a way that we're listening to understand again, right? Like, what I'll share is I would ask, like, if you and I have a conversation about something, and I would say, "Okay, Charles, just so I'm clear, this is what I heard.
Just so I'm clear.
This is what I heard." Boom. That does two things. A, sometimes I might have got it wrong, and you can go, no, 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 Milt, that's not what I meant. I meant wonderful. But
Mhm.
if I did get it clearly, now you know what happened.
Right.
Not only did I get it clearly, you know I did. You know I heard you. You
Mhm.
know I listened to you. That's a connection. That's
Right.
huge. So I think that's vitally important that we communicate, effectively, efficiently, and that we do it in a way that is active, so that the other, because when people feel heard, again, I'll go back to one of my earlier statements. We talked about the whole idea of discretionary effort. If
Mhm.
you feel heard and understood, and I need you to go a bit above and beyond, you're more likely to do that than if you think I'm just blowing this dude off.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, let's see. I think then that also plays a major part in people's critical thinking skills as well. Because if you're good at listening, then pretty much you already ciphered and understood via communication what was said, what's at hand, and what to do. Now we have a lot of people that are not good with critical thinking. So basically, you can be as clear and concise as possible, but they're still not getting it. Now,
Mhm.
how do you make up for that? Because I think that's got something to deal with comprehension or maybe just competency in general. Because not everybody's going to be able to listen.
That's fair. You're right. Sometimes that does happen, and what I will do is when those situations have happened with me, because they do from time to time, it happens, right?
Mhm.
Is what I will do is I will flip the active listening paradigm on its head.
Okay.
So, instead of me saying, "Okay, Charles, here's what I heard,"
Mhm.
I'm going to ask you, "What did you hear me say, Charles?"
You know what? Oh, ain't
What?
really funny because I've done that.
Yeah, because you're right. Sometimes I'm like, "Are we both speaking English?" Like maybe I'm losing my mind, but because oftentimes that will force the other party, right? If they've got to say to me, if I go, Charles, what did you hear me say, or what's your interpretation of what I just said,
Mhm.
and you'll share it,
Mhm.
that gives me the opportunity to clarify before, because to me the important part is that no matter how that goes, I want to make sure when we walk away from each other
Mhm.
that we're on the same page.
Wow. That's
There's clarity,
yeah.
right? So I would just take the active listening paradigm and flip it. And there's nothing wrong with asking.
Right.
Okay? So help me out. I want to understand that we're clear on this. So exactly, here's the issue. What are you going to be doing to address that moving forward? Like how are you going to act in such a way that and then you boom, 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 boom. I'm like, perfect, we're good. Or I don't. That's not exactly what I was talking about, and we
Mhm.
need to do the X. So I think that paradigm can be used in both of those circumstances and situations.
So, how do you address conflict and misalignment in teams?
I don't know if you ever saw the movie, and it's so funny that we're having that you asked that question that way, because it's popped into my head because a conversation I had yesterday with a team member who was talking about their aversion to conflict, right? Because conflict's not a bad thing,
Right.
right? I don't know if you remember in the movie Cry Freedom, starring Denzel Washington. This was 100 years ago. He was a very young man. He was playing Stephen Biko in the movie
What was it in the movie?
Cry Freedom.
Cry Freedom. Oh, I don't think I've seen that.
No, it was about apartheid South Africa.
Hmm.
Denzel Washington was playing the character Stephen Biko, who was an anti-apartheid activist, right?
Hmm.
And he was on trial, and he had written some things about the apartheid government, and talked about um, the need to be in direct conflict with them, right? So the prosecutor says to the character, he says, "You, in your own words, you said these things, right? That you want to be in conflict with the government." And the prosecutor was conflating conflict with violence.
Mhm.
right? And the character and Denzel's character Stephen Biko sat there and looked at the attorney when he said it and said, barrister, whatever they called him. I don't remember what they called the lawyers, but he said, "You and I are in conflict, but I see no violence." Right? Conflict is not a bad thing. I want you, Charles, if you're a member of my team,
Mhm.
if you think that I'm doing something that's not in the best interest of the team or not going to get us close to the goal, I want you to be able to speak up. And sometimes this is about a realigning the relationship with the idea of conflict, because oftentimes people think conflict as a negative thing.
Right.
It's important that we have that. It's important, So again, when you're building the team, you're building that trust. I want to build I want to build an environment where people are comfortable speaking their minds. That's fundamentally important. If you're going to be a high team organization, you need to be able to disagree. Like I get to games when Tom Brady and would literally be screaming at each other on the sidelines, screaming. But you know what happened after that? Tom put his helmet back on, went out there, and did what he needed to do. But that conflict was part of the entire of the ecosphere that was important, right? They had to have those conversations. They had to show that they were. But if you do it in a framework where it is clear that Charles and Milton are disagreeing, but the purpose of that disagreement is to improve the performance of the team and us as individuals, then that conflict is a positive thing and not a negative. So for me, it's about changing the perspective on how we see those things.
So, what's your process for helping teams navigate change or disruption?
What's the process look like? Okay. I would say this. The process is you build a strong core, right? Like here's an example that I'll give you, and that is that the team needs to have a clear view of what the mission is, right? Because if they do that, the team will hold themselves accountable, which is much more powerful than the manager, leader, coach, or whatever holding them accountable. I'll give you an example from my own personal experience. When I was in college, I played football. Right? Played football, and this I can name because it's just me. Played football for the East Carolina University Pirates, ECU Pirates, right?
Okay.
Right. And we called ourselves the Chain Gang. Right? We had T-shirts, everything made up.
You're doing a Jeff Blake era.
I was a couple years ahead of Jeff Blake. I played. I don't know if you've heard of Ernest Biner.
Yes.
Yeah. Me and Ernest Biner were in the backfield together at ECU for 2 years.
Okay.
So I was in that group right before Jeff Blake. But anyway, so we were the Chain Gang, right? And just imagine you being a coach of a bunch of 18 to say 22, 23-year-old guys. What could go wrong, right? There a lot of crazy crap, right? You're 18. I did a lot of crazy crap. So, but we were the Chain Gang, and each of us they gave each of us a link of chain to put on your keychain, right? And they said, the chain is no stronger than its weakest link.
Ooh, I like that.
Right? The chain is no stronger than its weakest link. And I need you guys to hold each other accountable to that.
Mm-hmm.
And we did. It's part of the culture, right? I'm not going to let you screw this up. So that's how you do that, right? And everybody on the team held each other accountable. And now, granted, in corporate that might be a bit more challenging because because it's not as clear. Like for us, the mission was clear every week: win the game. We're playing NC State this week. We're playing UNC. We're playing Florida State. Whatever. Win the game is clear. Again, the reason why the vision, mission, and goals need to be clear for the team, because if they are, you know what's going to happen if me and you are on the same team, Charles, and you see me not doing what I need to be doing. You're going to say, you're going to ask me the question that I often ask people, like, help me out. How's what you're doing helping us get closer to our goal?
Exactly.
Right. One reason I did stuff a client earlier today, and I suggested you need to put your vision mission on the wall. They're like, why? I said, here's why. When somebody walks into you with an idea, somebody says, hey, Charles, I got a great idea. And they articulate the idea to you. You point to that and go, help me understand how what you just shared we should be doing helps us get closer to that.
Mm.
If it does, we can consider it.
Mm-hmm.
But oftentimes you're going to self-correct because you'll say, can't see it. Right? So now I'm not telling you no. I asked you a question. Connect it. How does it explain? If you can connect those two things, we can have a conversation, my friend. If you can't, sorry. Because this is what we're about. Every freaking day. Right. This is what we're about.
I want to tell you, before we move on, that was just beautiful. I'll just tell you that. Basically, you just took a board and you just hit me all on top of the head.
Well, I didn't mean to do that.
I missed some things before, but that just snapped my whole brain just then.
Well,
oh, wow.
I'm glad, and I'm not so sure about the whole board metaphor thing, but yeah, but the idea is, right, because it's simple. And that's clarity. It's about clarity. We're all on this. Dude, if this is going to help us, I'm all in. If not, sorry. And you'll self-correct, because if I ask that simple question, right, how does that help me get closer to this? How does that help us get closer to what our stated goal is that we all buy into every day? If that's valuable in that regard, let's discuss it. If it is not, I am sorry. That ain't what we're here for. Same thing, that link of chain. And I actually still have it all these like 40 years later. I still have that link of chain. Right? Oh, wow. And I remember that. I still got the t-shirt that it's tattered now, but I still have that shirt. I never forget that. And that's what, as leaders, is vitally important. That's why having clarity is so, that's the first order of business.
Yeah, it is. How do you foster psychological safety in the workplace?
Geez, okay. Psychological safety, a great question. Probably one of the best exercises that I've ever heard for that is something called the Pixar approach. And it happens when you would walk into a like a brainstorming meeting about if you had an idea for a movie or you had an idea for a scene, right? Pixar pictures, right? You're familiar with that. And the Pixar approach is, I can never tell you no.
Right.
Everything is yes and. Right? So you come up with an idea, I go, okay, yeah, and. Right? So we continue to spin the ideas. There is no absolute, I'm not going to look at you and go, that was the stupidest thing I ever heard in my life. Don't ever come in here with anything like that ever again. Or, that was 30 seconds of my life I can't get back. I'm not going to insult you that way, right? So that whole picture of that yes and approach, right? While I may be dismissive of the idea, it's not a personal attack. I'll say yes and. Let's on to the next, because that creates so then no one ever feels like everybody in the room looked at them like, that's freaking stupid, right? Because the idea is to free you up to just throw things out there, because you never know where the great idea is going to come from. I'm sure if you think back, right, sometimes great ideas came from crazy stuff.
Yes.
If we self-constrain ourselves, that doesn't happen. But I like the Pixar approach because it does give us, it creates that safe place, because nobody's ever going to say no. When nobody's going to say that was stupid. We say, interesting. And if I can build on that idea, I will. Or I'll say yes and I might take it a whole different direction. But because the whole idea here is I want to get as many ideas out as possible. And then we'll find something that makes sense for us all.
So, what role does diversity play in team strength and innovation?
That's a great question, especially in this political environment, because I think that diversity has gotten a really, really bad rap, right? Yeah, a really bad rap. Diversity is vital. It is vital. I want diversity in all of its iterations. Now, sometimes, for instance, I'll give you an example of how diversity played a significant role in my own personal life. As a young man growing up, I had a brother. That was it. It was just two of us, right? Two boys. I have a daughter, right? I Before I had my daughter,
Mhm.
I really didn't think about or see the world through women's eyes. Didn't do it, right? But
Right.
as a quote unquote girl dad, I see things differently. Having her changed me in a way that was positive, right? So that's a personal example, but having people on your team who do not think like you, who have very different personal experiences than you, who live in a different cultural context than you, are vital because it will bring things to the fore that you would not be thinking of, right? So I think diversity is a strength. And now, if you want to go to biology, you think about it, diversity, like what? Why do you think they don't allow people to marry their brothers and sisters and cousins? Because they share too much DNA, and that leads to defect, right?
Mhm.
Right? We know that. If you go back and you look at the kings and queens of Europe, or the kings and queen, or or the pharaohs in Egypt, where they did a lot of intermarrying, there's a whole lot of
Incest.
yeah, there's a whole lot of issues. Right? I'll just leave it there. I don't know because this is a PG. It's a PG show, so there is a lot of issues. But what we know is that when we create diversity, it strengthens the genome and it strengthens us as organizations. So it is vitally important that we do that, that we have that. And this idea of homogeneity is antithetical to strength. It just is. So I think so whenever I hear people talk about or push back against diversity, because I think a lot of times when people push back against diversity, they're looking at it as a zero sum total game. If that person wins, I lose. Conversely, you build stronger teams, the organization gets stronger, it grows, the pie gets bigger, and there's more opportunity for everybody. You're looking at it fundamentally the wrong way.
let's move over to your work in human capital strategy.
Okay.
Can you tell us what does human capital mean to you beyond HR jargon?
Sure. Human capital means that the most valuable thing in your organization are the people who work there. Hard stop. We oftentimes do, like I do a lot of work with mergers and acquisitions, right? And people and you know private equity and all those and all those guys do a phenomenal job of evaluating the firm's value, evaluating their financial position, but they never think about the people. And for me, that is the most important capital. And I'm not going to go down the rabbit hole with you, but there are studies that show that when human capital, like when especially in the merger and acquisition world, right? When we see a merger that underperforms, almost always you can tie it back to people. It's just the bottom line. So I think it is fundamentally important that we focus on the most valuable asset that any organization has, and that's their people. And that's the way I look at human capital, if that makes sense.
Yes. How do you align talent strategy with business goals?
Well, I think that first off, and all the things we've been talking about now tie together, right? That's why understanding what the vision is, understanding what the mission is, understanding where you want to go, then I can begin to build the team that's going to help me get there. Right? It's kind of like, and I keep using these football examples because I have a background, right? But it's kind of like, depending on how you play football, depends on who you want on your team, and what that team looks like. Everybody needs an offensive line, but if we're a team that's predicated on speed, I don't need a bunch of 6'7", 320-pound guys. Yeah, but if I'm playing it in the Big Ten, in Ohio State, Michigan, and Wisconsin, where it's 5 freaking degrees, yeah, that's what I need. But you have to understand what is it that we want to accomplish, and how are we going about that. Then I can begin to choose what type of people, what kind of skill sets, what kind of understanding, what kind of predispositions I want on the team. But it all stems from us having a clear understanding of not only what is it we want to achieve, but how do we want to go about achieving that thing. So once we understand those things, then we can begin to build that human capital plan, and not the other way around. Sometimes people want to go, hey, I want that person, Milton is phenomenal at X. I want him on my team. Great. But if you're building a team that doesn't fit Milton's skill sets, is he going to be able to perform? And like I said, all of us who are sports fans have seen that. You've seen the guy or the woman who gets traded, and they go to the new place and crap the bed. Did they just forget how to do their job? No.
That's right.
Yeah, they're not a good fit. So I think that it's vital that we gain clarity about what it is that we're trying to accomplish and how we're trying to accomplish it before we even begin talking about human capital, right? And then once we have clarity on how I want to succeed with our team, then I can build up my human capital plan and understand what the skills I need, what the personality types I need, all the kind of things.
So what trends are shaping the future of workforce development?
Wow. There are a couple of things. I think that one of the biggest ones right now is AI, and AI is a double-edged sword, right? Mm-hmm. AI, here's the thing. I don't even like the term intelligence being connected with AI, because it's not intelligent. Basically, what it's really, it's like a super fast lookup system, right? It's just pulling data. So, and there's a use for that. That's powerful. But conversely, what's important for us is that we need to be able to know and understand how to ask the right questions. Because if you, like, I'm sure you've heard the old term, giggle, garbage in, garbage out. If we're not asking the right questions, we're going to get crap out. So there's that. The other thing I think that is a huge challenge that we face now and moving forward is social media. And I say in social media because of this, and I know I'm going to sound like an old man that says, hey, stay off my lawn when I say this, but there's a lot of truth to this, is that younger people have lost the ability to interact with other humans because they focusing on social media all the time. I have a nephew who graduated high school a few years ago, and him and my brother live in Los Angeles. Like, I went out there to his graduation, and him and some of his buddies were sitting in a room, waiting to go to graduation, and they're texting each other, and they were literally sitting right next to each other.
Yep.
Right? And so the ability to communicate is being damaged irreparably by social media and by technology. And those are things that, if I'm looking at the macro level, things that are going to be challenges moving forward, and I think that leaders in organizations, how do you deal with those two things, right? How do you deal with artificial intelligence and making sure that people understand how to use that tool? And then secondly, how do you make sure that, because, like I said, the nature of people are feeling beings that think, not thinking beings that feel, people need to be able to relate to each other. And if they can't, that's a challenge. How do I deal with a workforce that is woefully inadequate in that? Those are big challenges moving forward.
Now, as you just said that, and if you could, I want you to clarify this for us, okay? Because I agree with all of that you just said. Mm-hmm. But just taking in consideration, that one, when we think about today's times and these kids today, is everything has to be instant gratification.
Mm-hmm.
So therefore, the technology takes away the ability to think because they're not critically thinking.
Mm-hmm.
Two, it takes away the communications because they will tell you quickly, don't call me, text me, send me an email or however they do this messaging thing that they do.
Right.
Send me that. They don't want to meet people personally, but they want to talk to people.
Mm-hmm.
So in other words, I'm talking about when they get to the dating situation, they want to see people on an app. So when it comes time to actually meeting people in person,
Mm-hmm.
then everything goes sour because that interaction is not what it's supposed to be because somebody done did the I forgot what they call it, where the people don't look like who they are.
Mm-hmm.
And so, and so now you got all this in the mix. And now these are the people. Now, just to be clear, these are the people right now that people are looking forward to running this country in the future. So now, if there's no real interaction, if there's no real communication, if there's no real thinking, especially from the critical perspective,
Mm-hmm.
what is the outlook going to look like going into the future?
Charles, you might have stumped me. I don't know, right? Because I just don't know. I think that, and this kind of, I think goes beyond, you know, beyond the scope of my expertise, because I think that there needs to be some fundamental changes about how we interact with technology, because it's undermining society. It just flat out is, right? Um, just the way algorithms work in such a way that we don't see opposing opinion. We get caught in these little vortexes of our own, right? That is counterproductive, right? It is, and then like you said, the idea that people use technology to kind of, and even the idea that somehow you'll see things like about how suicide rates are up, how depression is up, is because people, they've been able to use social media in such a way that they think that everybody's life is better than theirs, and that everybody looks better than they do, and everybody is, but it's all artificial. It's not real, right? So, and I don't have a lot of confidence, candidly. But if Washington was about doing the right thing, it would be, you know, the compulsion about how these algorithms work. They'd stop some of that stuff. They'd limit the influence of social media and some of these algorithms, because technology is getting kids and people into these little rabbit holes and vortexes, right? And even on college campuses, like, and I didn't share this in my background, but before I got into the consulting world, I was a professor of business at a local university here in South Jersey. And universities, Milton's perspective, universities are supposed to be safe physically. You should be safe. Your children should be safe. Intellectually, they should be challenging as hell.
Yes.
Right? I need to be challenged in the way I think. I need to hear opposing ideas. I need to get pushback. That's how we grow. But we've created these cocoons where it's all reinforcement of you're wonderful and the rest of the world is horrible. And I really, really, really don't, I'm not sure how we get out of this. And it's concerning. It is very, very concerning. But and to get back to my area of expertise and understanding, it's like, how do you create an environment at work, right, where you change those expectations, where in this environment interacting with humans is essential. Like, I don't like I don't, and I understand the value of being able to work virtually.
Mhm.
I do, right? I do it sometimes. Not gonna lie, it's great that I don't have to, hop on an airplane and fly to freaking Michigan in the winter, because been in Michigan, beautiful state. If you're in Michigan watching this, love you. I just don't want to be there in freaking winter because it's ridiculously cold. Right? And I ain't built for that foolishness. But so in that regard, it's fantastic. But it can create this cocooning, right? And so it's important that we interact. So one of the things it's so funny, I've been working with one of our clients, and we're talking about designing workspaces, that draw people in and that are conducive to communication. And how do you create this? And that's one of the tools that I've seen some people use successfully, is this idea of the physical design of the workplace.
Mhm.
Like I'm like I said, I have a couple of clients that I consult with now who do not have offices.
Mhm.
No, even the CEO doesn't have an office, right? It's all open space. The idea there is to try to reinforce collaboration. How do you have so we can use some of those things architecturally to try to do it, but it's a real challenge moving forward, man. It
Yeah,
truly
and
is.
so, I just, I was just, in just speaking from, as we're talking about human capital, you
Uh-huh.
know, is that, with all that being shaped around what's going into the future, that's just my whole premise of, like, where are we going to go? Because, I mean, as much as I love what could be a beautiful future, I see a lot of hiccups, and I just don't see a lot of things being what they should be and what we want them to be because we're relying so much on the technology. I'm not saying the technology is the worst thing in the world. That's not what I'm
Mhm.
saying. But what I'm saying is that people are overusing it and abusing it in a way that it's taking away everything from them being human.
Absolutely. Yeah, no,
Yeah.
listen, I could not agree with you more. You're absolutely right, and I think that's one of the challenges and that's what I meant about changing some of the algorithms, because it's a lot. I use AI. It's a fantastic tool. Right? It can
It
help me do
is.
things in something that could take me half a day. It takes me 10 minutes.
Yeah.
Right? That's the truth. It's fantastic,
Mhm.
but like I said, human beings are social animals, and this is in the way that social media exists now. The way that technology is kind of moving us away from that.
Yep.
Right? It's allowing us to be cocooned. It's stopping us from having conversation. It's stopping us from interacting. That's a dangerous thing for social beings. It just is. And I think anything that we can do that can help people re-engage socially. And I do love the idea. It's funny, as I was talking and responding to your earlier question, and I did start thinking about that, the open workplace concept, how that's useful, that's helpful, right?
Mhm.
Because I don't want you to be able to go sit in an office,
Right.
be out here, meet the people that you work with, talk to, you know, go into the office more often than not. Make that a requirement as a leader. And now that's the balance. How do I balance that, right? Because if you're a high performer and you have options, and I tell you need to be in the office 3 days a week or 4 days a week, and the firm down the street says you can work remotely, and you prefer that, you're likely to do that. So there's yeah, if there's anything that I'm concerned about over the next few years, it's the impact of technology and social media on human beings in the workplace. That's frightening, and I don't really have great answers, to be honest with you right
So, one of the things also that we chatted about when we spoke is I told you that we do Black History 365.
now. Mhm.
And I asked you, when it comes to Black history, who was the most influential person or persons in your life or career? You mentioned Reginald Lewis in your career and Malcolm X in your life. Can you tell us, why is Reginald Lewis the most influential figure in your career?
Sure. The thing that I find most inspiring about Reginald Lewis, because I'm a firm believer that that things are easier when you see yourself doing it already, right? And Reginald Lewis is the personification of that. Reginald Lewis went. He I don't know how familiar you are with him, but he did his undergraduate at VCU, Virginia Commonwealth, right? Now he did go to Harvard Law, but he was so and he's from originally from Baltimore. My mother's family's from Baltimore, so that's so there's that connection. And to see a man who looks like me being able to navigate Wall Street, be able to, to get a seat at the table and play the game made it real for me.
The real will and deal guy.
Exactly. and that to me was, that's phenomenal. One of the things, and not to wheel this 360 around to me, but I now, it's been a number of years since I've been teaching, since I've not taught anymore. And I remember bumping into one of my former students, a young black man, and he is now a partner at a relatively large accounting firm in Philadelphia. And I bumped into him, and I hadn't seen him in years. And so we got to chit chat, and I was really happy for his success, all that kind of good stuff. And he said to me that when I walked into your class and I saw somebody who looked like me, it gave me faith that I could do it. Yeah, and that's what Reginald Lewis means to me. Right? I can do it because I've seen it. So that's what made him to me so powerful.
So what lessons from Lewis's journey do you apply in your own work?
Well, self-belief. Right? Nobody believed in Reginald Lewis more than Reginald Lewis believed in himself. He never took a step back. I try not to do that. Right? And, he demanded a seat at the table. And he got it. Those are things that to me were fundamentally important about him, right? And that I try to emulate. The idea that when, like I shared with you about those CEOs who I walked in, and I was able to walk into those rooms because I was at the very least their equal. In a lot of ways, I'm their superior, and I carried myself that way. I believe that, right? And seeing that guy and watching what he did from Baltimore, went to Virginia, VCU. And no, it was a VCU of Virginia State. It was HBCU. I think it was Virginia State. And that guy, became a titan of Wall Street. Absolutely. Why can't you be whatever you want to be? And that's what, to me, that was the power. And those are the things I tried to emulate.
How did his book, Why Should White Guys Have All the Fun, shape your mindset?
Oh, okay, the book. Great. Yeah. It's the same thing. I own it. I should have a seat at the table. If you want me to sit at your table, and if you won't let me sit at your table, I'm going to build my own freaking table.
Yes.
Okay? Because, and I know, at some point we're going to be running short on time, but here's the thing I will say, is that if you took the African American community and just set it aside as its own economy, it is the seventh largest economy on planet Earth. Right? So we have power. We just got to learn how to coalesce it and use it. Right? So if they won't let you at the table, build your own freaking table. Right? And demand a seat.
What does Lewis's legacy mean for Black professionals in corporate spaces?
To me, it's that it's to me that we can own those spaces. We belong. Okay, not only we belong, but we can own the space. Reginald Lewis did not work for IBM, Xerox, Sears, and Roebuck. He didn't work for Amazon. He built the Lewis Company, TLC. Okay, so we can build our own. That to me is the power.
Why is Malcolm X the most influential figure in your life?
The thing that I revere about Malcolm X the most is his ability to continue to reinvent himself. You think about how he grew up in what was it, Nebraska. I can't remember the name of the town.
Okay.
Yeah, Omaha. Yeah. How he started off his life as a, and became a petty criminal, drug dealer, all of those things, right? And he was able, through his own courage, because you know how difficult it is to change, how much courage it takes to change. Change. He became a completely different human being when he joined the Nation of Islam, right? And then, right before his death, he was becoming a different human being. He was growing and iterating again. And the other thing I love about Malcolm X, I think is so, that I think probably he's more famous for than what I just described, is that Malcolm X spoke truth to power. And he was unafraid.
Unapologetically.
Yeah, exactly. Unapologetically unafraid. And that's a powerful thing. And here's the thing, is that this young man from Omaha, Nebraska, who basically educated himself in jail, became one of the most powerful men on the face of the earth because he chose to be. That's powerful. And each one of us has that exact same ability if we're willing to put in the work. And that, to me, is the beauty of Malcolm X.
What did Malcolm teach you about clarity, conviction, and truth telling?
Again, that how can I put it? Malcolm X was clear on who he was, and he was willing to live that out every day unapologetically, right? And he was willing to speak truth to power unapologetically, and that for the and for the most part, right? While people were angry, people were afraid, people were scared, he moved the needle.
Yes, he did.
He moved the needle, right? Powerful guy. And it was because he had the courage of his conviction. And and if there's anything that I think about with him or that I want to emulate him with, is that having the courage of my convictions, right? And say the quiet part out loud. Say the part that's uncomfortable for people out loud. Challenge people out loud. And that to me is what made him such a unique character.
So, how do you carry Malcolm X's principles into your leadership philosophy?
Honesty, clarity, speak truth to power. And a belief in your mission, which he did. Think about it. To a large degree, I mean, everybody knows that, the Nation of Islam was
That's a separate part than Islam itself.
yeah, absolutely, 100%. Yeah, but I'm just saying, if you think about what he did to build that movement, right? Yeah, everybody knows Elijah Muhammad was there, but the Nation of Islam would never become what it became without Malcolm X. Let's be real. Let's be real. No way that happens without that man, right? So, and again, just the courage of his convictions and his, again, it's all ties back in together. His clarity of vision, right? He knew what he wanted to build. He knew how he wanted. And religion, the Nation of Islam, was simply a vehicle to help him get there. He was about the empowerment of his people. He was about empowering Black people. Now, he thought that Islam was the vehicle for that, but for him it was always about the empowerment of his people. That's really what Malcolm X was all about.
Final question for you: What does Black excellence mean to you in the context of business?
What does Black excellence mean to me in the context? Well, first off, we've always been excellent. That's number one. I think that that story needs to be told. If we go back and we look throughout the history of this nation, we look throughout the history of invention and in this nation, we have always been there. So that story needs to get told. That's number one. Number two, it is to reinforce. I don't even. I hesitate to use the word belief because it's not a belief; it's a fact.
Mm-hmm.
To reinforce the fact that we have a seat at that table. Okay. And like I said, if they don't want to give it to you, build your own freaking table. Right. The seventh largest economy on the face of earth would be African Americans. Use that power to demand your seat. Use that power to build your all the things that I'm teaching. While I am typically hired and work a lot with business, right? Make no mistake, this isn't simply leadership isn't a business paradigm. And it's important. And what I want to do is help build leaders that help build America, and specifically to help build Black America, right? So that we can take our rightful seat. That's what makes me get up every morning.
Well, I want to tell you, I want to thank you for contributing here, because that's exactly what we're doing here. In closing, can you do you have some words of wisdom and encouragement for our audience? Tell them how they can connect with you on social media, your websites, or any of those good things that you like for them to know.
Absolutely. Again, my name is Milton. You can see my name on. I don't need to spell it; it's right there. I don't need to spell it for you. You can find me on LinkedIn. You can find me on Facebook, and mostly all of my social media handles are my name. So Milton Corsey. Please look me up. I am more than willing to have a conversation or connect with anybody who wants to have a connection. Please do that. As far as my website, you can find it at AchieveNext, AchieveNext.com, AchieveNext.com. And the whole idea of that is, hey, how can we help you achieve that next level of success, whatever that might look like for you? That's where the firm's name comes from. And I am our director of human capital solutions. I run all of our leadership development programs, manager training programs, strategic, strategic planning and things of that nature is what I do. So if any of those things you're interested in, please reach out. Please check us out on the website, and please feel free to drop me an email at milton.corsey@achievenext.com. Charles, it's been a real pleasure, my friend. Thank you so very much for the opportunity to come on here and talk to you. I've truly enjoyed it.
Well, I thank you. And it was just in the chat that term I was looking for when the people don't look like themselves is called catfishing.
There you go. There you go.
But so I want to thank you, Milton, for being here, and I want to thank everybody that was watching tonight. For those of you that are watching on any of our 8 channels, I would appreciate it if you would actually take the time to support us by actually going to the channels, especially YouTube channels, and subscribing and enable all notifications so that you're able to catch each and every show live, as well as going back and watch each and every episode that's got a lesson for each of you to learn. I want to thank you again, Milton, and I want to thank everybody that was watching. You guys are wonderful, and please come back and check us out tomorrow night, as we will have another episode for you on America in Black and White. I am doing a special show tomorrow where I will be talking about Black media. It's a can't miss, and I hope to see each and every last one of you there, because our story needs to be told by us, not by others. Thank you again, Milton. You all have a wonderful evening, and we will see you guys tomorrow night, 6 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Have a great night.